Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. I was stretched out on the couch, idly flipping through my phone, barely registering the sitcom rerun buzzing faintly from the TV. It wasn't even a show I cared for, just background noise to fill the quiet. My wife walked in, and her expression immediately caught my attention. That look, a blend of determination and hesitation, hinted at something rehearsed but not yet perfected. Lowering the volume on the TV, I turned my full focus to her. "We need to talk," she said, her arms crossed firmly. I sat up straight in an instant. Those 4 words rarely bode well. "All right," I said cautiously, studying her face for clues. She hesitated, as though summoning the courage for what came next. Then, with no preamble, she declared, "I think we should consider a sexless marriage." My initial reaction was to laugh, a startled, uneasy chuckle. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded so absurd that I assumed it had to be a joke. "Are you serious? What is this? Are you saying you want a divorce?" I asked, still half laughing, though my nerves betrayed me. Her expression remained unyielding. If anything, she seemed even more resolved. "No," she said firmly. "I'm completely serious. I've thought about this a lot, and I truly believe it could bring us closer as a couple." I stared at her, stunned into silence. The words hung in the air, incomprehensible. Who was this woman? This wasn't the person I had built a life with, the partner I'd shared love and laughter with for years. My stomach churned as I grappled with the reality of her suggestion. "Wait, what?" I finally managed. "Where is this coming from? Are you unhappy? Did I do something wrong?" She sighed, a sound that suggested she'd anticipated my questions, but had already dismissed them in her mind. "No, it's not about that. I've been reading, listening to podcasts, following these amazing women who talk about rediscovering themselves. They say physical intimacy can sometimes distract from deeper issues in a relationship. Podcasts? Influencers? Blogs?" My head spun. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "You read a few things online, and now you think our marriage is flawed?" Her patience began to wear thin. "That's not what I'm saying," she retorted. "I'm saying we should try something different, something that could help us grow." "No intimacy," I repeated almost incredulously, as if the phrase itself could clarify its meaning. "And you think that's going to strengthen our marriage?" Her tone shifted, now tinged with defensiveness. "You're withdrawn. It's not about giving up intimacy forever. It's about setting it aside for a while to focus on who we are as individuals and as a couple." "As a couple?" I shot back. "What kind of couple doesn't have intimacy?" Her words felt foreign to me, and I lacked the vocabulary to bridge the gap. "You can't just spring this on me like it's some kind of experiment," I said, frustration bubbling up. "This isn't a trendy new diet. This is our marriage." She sat down across from me, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Exactly. This is our marriage, and that's why it's worth exploring what's truly important. This isn't about rejecting you or punishing you. It's about discovering who we are without leaning on physical connection as a crutch." That word, crutch, hit me harder than I expected. Our intimacy wasn't a crutch to me. It was love, connection, the bond that held us together through life's chaos. Without it, what were we? Just 2 people splitting bills? "I can't believe you're serious," I said after a pause. "This is ridiculous." Her face fell momentarily before she composed herself. "You're not even willing to consider it," she said softly, as though I were the one being unreasonable. "No, I'm not," I replied firmly. "Because what you're asking for isn't a marriage, at least not the kind I signed up for." The silence that followed was oppressive. She looked at me as though expecting some epiphany to dawn, for me to suddenly understand her perspective. But all I felt was confusion, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Then it hit me. It's not just about intimacy. This was about something deeper, something simmering beneath the surface of our relationship for who knows how long, and I had no idea how to address it. In the days that followed, I kept hoping she'd come to her senses, that she'd laugh it off and admit it was a misguided idea she'd picked up from an influencer. But she didn't. Instead, she seemed even more resolute. The changes came gradually at first. She spent more time absorbed in her phone, always wearing earbuds and listening to the same podcasts and videos that, I assumed, reinforced her newfound ideology. One day, I overheard a snippet. A woman's worth isn't tied to her ability to please a man. She quickly paused it, her reaction akin to a teenager caught sneaking something forbidden. Interesting? I asked, trying to sound casual. She shrugged. Just some things I've been reflecting on. That shrug cut deeper than it should have. She'd always been an open book, eager to share her thoughts. Now she was distant and guarded. Her wardrobe even changed. Sleek, professional outfits replaced her usual relaxed attire. "You look nice," I said one morning, attempting to reconnect. "Thanks," she replied flatly, brushing past me. Our conversations became shallow, devoid of warmth. When I asked about her day, she offered one-word replies. Worse, she started parroting phrases straight out of self-help content. "I'm focusing on finding myself," she said one night when I tried to address the growing chasm between us. "Finding yourself?" I echoed. "You're right here." "You wouldn't understand," she said, her tone detached and icy. The breaking point came a week later. She handed me her phone, showing me a post by an influencer I'd never heard of. The caption discussed how intimacy wasn't necessary for a fulfilling relationship and claimed abstinence could lead to personal and spiritual growth. "What do you think?" she asked, her eyes expectant. I stared at her, incredulous. What do I think? I think this person has no idea who we are or what we've been through. How could this apply to us? "It's not about her," she replied, irritated. "It's about the idea. Don't you see any truth in it?" "No," I said bluntly. "I think it's nonsense." She sighed, visibly disappointed. "See? This is what I mean. You're so unwilling to consider new perspectives." New perspectives? I didn't know how to respond. All I knew was that the person sitting next to me was no longer the woman I married. "Is this some kind of manipulation?" I blurted out, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Because that's exactly how it feels. You're not acting like yourself anymore." She didn't respond. Without a glance in my direction, she stood up and left the room. I sat there, frozen, trying to process the sinking realization that my thoughts, and maybe even I, didn't seem to matter to her anymore. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring into the darkness, replaying every decision, every conversation that had brought us to this point. Though she was only inches away, the distance between us felt insurmountable. The woman I'd once known so intimately, the one who understood me better than anyone, felt like a stranger now. My mind raced with a single haunting thought. She was keeping something from me. This wasn't just about a sudden shift in mindset or a new personal philosophy. People don't shed their closeness overnight or begin speaking in riddles without cause. No, there had to be more. Someone else, perhaps. The idea crept in uninvited, striking me with gut-wrenching force. Was she involved with another person? I hated myself for even entertaining the thought, but the suspicion dug its claws in, refusing to be ignored. It all fit: the sudden emotional walls, her evasiveness, the obsession with those so-called influencers. Was this talk of finding herself just a smokescreen? The more I dwelled on it, the more the idea festered, until I couldn't bear it any longer. The next morning, while she showered, I reached for her phone. Instantly, guilt swept over me. I despised the way I was sneaking around, but my doubts wouldn't let me rest. Her phone was locked, and I didn't know the passcode. That, in itself, felt jarring. We'd always been transparent about little things like that. My hands trembled as I placed it back down. What was I even looking for? Proof of infidelity? And if I found it, what then? The mere fact that I doubted her so deeply made me feel sick. Throughout the day, I watched her more closely. Every time her phone lit up with a notification, she glanced at it briefly before tucking it away like a secret. She spent hours secluded in her makeshift workspace, claiming she was journaling or working on herself. "Who are you texting all the time?" I asked one evening, doing my best to sound casual. Startled, she looked up from her screen, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just some women from an online support group," she said. "We're exploring new ideas together." "What kind of support group?" I pressed further. Her expression tightened. "Why does that matter?" she shot back, her voice sharp. "Because you're not yourself," I said. "You barely talk to me, but it seems like you tell them everything. Do they know more about our marriage than I do?" She glared at me, then left the room without another word. The following nights blurred together in a haze of sleeplessness and questions I couldn't answer. Had I missed something crucial? Was there an obvious reason she'd drifted away? Every time she left the room with her phone in hand, my mind spiraled with worst-case scenarios. One night, unable to resist, I turned to her laptop. I hated myself for it, but the need for answers consumed me. Her browsing history was scrubbed clean. Too clean. But there was one thing she hadn't closed: her email. Hesitant, I clicked. The inbox was filled with newsletters and discussions from those influencers she followed. At first, nothing seemed out of place, until a single name caught my attention: Nora. The messages between them were alarmingly familiar, filled with inside jokes and personal compliments. One email read, "Your advice earlier really helped clarify things for me." Another said, "You have such an open mind. It's inspiring." My stomach turned. Who was Nora? Just another voice in this self-help crowd or something more? The uncertainty began to devour me. Every glance at her locked phone, every vague reply felt like confirmation of my worst fears. Yet I couldn't confront her, not until I was sure. Over the next week, I became consumed by the search for clarity. I stayed awake while she scrolled late into the night, my imagination running wild with damning scenarios. The breaking point came after dinner one evening. She asked me to handle the dishes so she could catch up with her group. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice, but this time, something inside me snapped. "Fine," I said coldly, "while you go lock yourself away and talk to people who seem to know more about you than I do." She stopped mid-step, her plate hovering in the air. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her tone clipped. "It means you've shut me out," I said, unable to contain my frustration. "You're glued to your phone, obsessed with these ridiculous ideas, and now you're throwing our intimacy away like it doesn't matter. Can't you hear how absurd that sounds?" Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. "I'm not shutting you out," she fired back. "I've been trying to talk to you about this for weeks, but you dismiss everything I say. You make me feel like I'm crazy for wanting more from this marriage." "More?" I snapped. "More than what we've built together? More than the bond that makes us more than just roommates? Is that all so disposable to you now?" Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to an icy calm. "You're not listening. I'm saying intimacy doesn't have to define us. There are other ways to connect." "And who told you that? One of your influencers? Or maybe Nora?" The name escaped before I could stop it. Her jaw dropped, and the room fell into a suffocating silence. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "You went through my messages?" "Yes," I admitted, unflinching. "Because I don't recognize you anymore, and I'm trying to figure out who I'm even married to." "You violated my privacy," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "And you violated our marriage the moment you decided some stranger online had better advice about us than I do," I shot back. The fight erupted, a torrent of accusations and buried resentments pouring out. She called me controlling and paranoid. I called her selfish and unrecognizable. The argument wasn't just about intimacy anymore. It was about trust, identity, and everything we'd lost along the way. As the tension reached its peak, I finally voiced the question that had been haunting me all along. The question left my lips before I could stop it. Are you seeing someone else? Her entire body stiffened, her expression a storm of disbelief and fury. How dare you? She hissed, her tone sharp and simmering with anger. Is that really what you think of me? How could you even suggest such a thing? What am I supposed to think? I retorted, frustration spilling out in my gestures. You've shut me out completely. You barely talk to me anymore. You're constantly glued to your phone, and suddenly, intimacy is off the table. How else am I supposed to understand what's happening? Her voice dropped to an icy whisper, cutting deeper than any shout could. I thought you knew me better than that. Without another word, she spun on her heel and disappeared into the office, the door slamming shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. I stood frozen in the aftermath, surrounded by the wreckage of our fight. The sink overflowed with unwashed dishes, the couch was draped with blankets she had angrily cast aside, and the air was thick with the tension neither of us knew how to resolve. I sank onto the couch, burying my head in my hands as the weight of it all pressed down on me. We were unraveling, and for the first time, I began to wonder if we'd ever truly been on the same page. The silence that followed was deafening. Days stretched into a blur of detached exchanges. The trash needs taking out. I'm going to bed. There's dinner in the fridge. Living with her felt like sharing space with a ghost. Yet, despite the growing distance, I wasn't ready to give up. One evening, determined to break the impasse, I approached her while she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with earbuds in. My heart pounded as I sat across from her and cleared my throat. She glanced up, visibly annoyed, and pulled out one earbud. I think we need to try counseling, I said, keeping my tone steady. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Counseling? Yes, I replied. This isn't working, and we need help. Someone neutral who can help us figure this out. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms skeptically. You think a stranger is going to solve our problems? Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe they won't. But we can't keep going like this. Pretending everything's fine isn't helping, and neither is waiting for the next fight. She didn't respond immediately. Her gaze shifted to the floor, and she exhaled slowly. I don't think I need therapy, she said carefully, as though choosing her words with precision. I fought the urge to snap, swallowing my frustration. You might not feel like you need it, but I do. This isn't just about you, it's about us, and we're not okay. Her eyes met mine, her expression unreadable. After a pause, she said, I'll think about it. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Clinging to that fragile thread of hope, I found a couples therapist the next day and scheduled an appointment. That evening, I told her about the appointment. She gave a brief nod and agreed to go, but her demeanor remained guarded. When the day arrived, the tension in the therapist's office was nearly unbearable. When asked why we were there, I poured out my frustrations, how blindsided I felt by her emotional withdrawal and the way our relationship had shifted. She sat with her arms folded, avoiding my gaze. But when it was her turn to speak, her voice was calm and steady. I feel like I've lost myself in this relationship, she admitted, her words striking me harder than I expected. I've spent so much time trying to be who he needed me to be that I've forgotten who I am. I opened my mouth to respond, but the therapist gently stopped me, urging me to let her continue. She took a deep breath and added, I've been reflecting a lot, and I've realized that I need space to figure out who I am, outside of this marriage. The therapist turned to me. How does that make you feel? Like I'm drowning, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It feels like she's already given up on us and just doesn't want to say it. That's not true, she said quickly, her eyes finally meeting mine. I haven't given up. I just need time to figure things out. And what am I supposed to do while you figure it out? I asked, my frustration breaking through. Wait around, wondering if you're coming back? The therapist intervened, redirecting us to discuss boundaries and communication. The session ended with a fragile truce, but it became clear in the weeks that followed that we were moving in different directions. She participated in the sessions, but her focus remained on personal growth. Whenever I tried to bring up our future, she sidestepped the conversation. One night, I couldn't keep my feelings bottled up any longer. Do you even want this to work? I asked bluntly. Her hesitation was brief but telling. I think I do, she said finally, but I can't make any promises. Her words were like a cold blade, cutting deep. For the first time, I realized that no matter how hard I fought, I couldn't save something she wasn't sure she wanted. That night, her voice echoed in my mind. I can't make any promises. By morning, I knew I had to make a choice for myself. That evening, I found her at the table, her laptop open. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm. She looked up warily. What is it? I can't do this anymore, I said. I need to know where we're headed because living in limbo is tearing me apart. Are you committed to this marriage or not? Her gaze dropped to her hands. That's not fair, she murmured. This isn't easy for me either. Then prove it, I replied. Show me that you still care, because I can't keep giving everything to someone who won't meet me halfway. Her silence was louder than any argument. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't know if I can. I need more time. I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. Then I guess that's my answer. Her eyes filled with tears. What does that mean? It means I'm done fighting for something you're not sure you want, I said. If you need space, take it. But I can't keep waiting. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, hoping she'd come to me, say she wanted to try or even apologize. But the door never opened. The next morning, I faced the reality of what had to happen. When she came home that evening, I met her at the door. We need to separate, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. She nodded, as though she'd reached the same conclusion. Maybe that's for the best, she whispered. And just like that, it was over. No dramatic goodbyes, no pleas to reconsider, just a quiet acknowledgement that we'd reached the end. For the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled, feeling a sense of clarity and release. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. For close to half an hour, the advanced security system had been streaming crystal-clear video footage directly to both the sheriff's office and the ranch owner's smartphone. The live feed meticulously documented every move and word exchanged by the intruders at the remote ranch house. At the sheriff's office, the dispatcher sat riveted, her face betraying a mix of astonishment and unease as the events unfolded on the screen. After several minutes of stunned silence, she finally mustered the presence of mind to alert the nearest available officer, who happened to be the sheriff. Without delay, she grabbed her personal phone and dialed the ranch owner to inform him of the unfolding situation. Roughly 35 minutes after entering the quaint, rustic house, the two trespassers emerged, their arms wrapped around each other. They paused beside a large pickup truck parked just beyond the property's fence. The man opened the passenger door and lifted the slim, long-legged blonde onto the step, planting a lingering kiss on her exposed midriff just above the waistband of her low-cut shorts. She laughed, twisting playfully, but still holding his head close. Feel like going a little further, babe? She teased, her lips curving into a sly grin. If you keep making me this happy, she added with a coquettish smirk. I might let you take me over the tailgate again." The man chuckled, his laugh low and menacing. "Two issues with that, darling. First, I don't go for someone else's scraps. That's for soft guys like your spineless little husband. Maybe you can save him a taste of me as a birthday surprise when he gets back. Second," he continued, his tone growing firm, "I'm on borrowed time already. I should be on the dozer over at the Martin site. Pretty sure your husband doesn't pay me to keep his wife entertained. Even an April fool would know better than that, huh? Being born today suits him, doesn't it?" She pouted, pressing his head against her stomach. "Oh, come on. Let's not talk about him. He's gone until tonight, and I've got needs. 40 minutes isn't enough for me. Don't even think about treating me like some meek little sub." His lips curled into a smirk. "That's your husband's job, sweetheart." She climbed into the cab with a huff, rubbing her chest as if nursing an invisible wound. Meanwhile, he stomped over to the driver's side, slid into his seat, and glared at her. "Listen, you're easy on the eyes, but let's get one thing straight. I'm not your pool boy or one of those other lackeys your rich husband keeps around. Pull anything on me, and I'll make sure you regret it." Her expression darkened, and her lips twisted into a snarl. Before either could say another word, a loud crack split the air, and the truck's rearview mirror exploded into shards, scattering glass across his hand. He froze, staring in shock at the shattered remains. Slowly, he turned toward Savannah, who looked equally stunned. Another shot rang out, shattering the side mirror on his door. This time, the sound of the gunfire reached his ears. "What the hell?" he muttered, staring at the broken glass. Savannah's piercing scream shattered his daze as she pointed at her own side mirror, her face pale with terror. "Someone's shooting at us!" Eric yelled, fumbling to start the engine. He slammed on the accelerator, sending the truck skidding on the loose gravel as they sped toward the road half a mile away. More bullets struck the tailgate in rapid succession as they fled. "Get down!" Eric shouted as Savannah curled into a ball on the floorboard, her hands covering her head. She whimpered, "Please don't let me die. Please, God, don't let me die." The truck roared down the dirt path, but just 50 yards from the gate, another bullet struck the tailgate. "Damn it!" Eric growled through gritted teeth. "If he's this good, he could pick me off when I get out to open the gate." Without hesitation, he rammed the truck through the heavy metal gate, sending it crashing onto the road. As he backed up to dislodge the fallen gate, Eric turned the truck toward town, his stomach sinking when he spotted a sheriff's SUV parked across the highway, its lights flashing. He slammed on the brakes just in time to avoid a collision, jumped out, and crouched behind the truck. "Nigel!" he yelled. "Someone's shooting at us! He's using a high-powered rifle, so watch yourself!" The sheriff, a stocky man with an authoritative presence, stepped out of his vehicle and fixed Eric with a sharp glare. "We got a call about trespassers at Aaron's ranch. That wouldn't happen to be you, would it?" Eric fought to keep his voice calm. "No, I was there with Savannah, Aaron's wife. She needed to grab some earrings she forgot. We were just leaving when someone started shooting at us." The sheriff's skeptical eyes swept over the truck. "So this shooter managed to take out all your mirrors and your tailgate but didn't hit either of you? Convenient." Savannah, still shaking, stepped out of the truck at the sheriff's command. She clung to Eric, pleading, "Please don't let him kill me. Aaron, he knows. I don't know how, but he knows." The sheriff frowned, his tone laced with doubt. "Savannah, Aaron's out of town on business. If he wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead." Realizing her mistake, Savannah stammered, I'm sorry. I've never been shot at before. It must have been someone else." Though the sheriff didn't seem entirely convinced, he let it slide. Deputies arrived to clear the wreckage, and traffic resumed. After giving their statements, Eric and Savannah were released. She rushed off to her beauty appointment, while Eric returned to the Martin site to finish his work, both silently praying their shaky alibi would hold up under scrutiny. After the pandemonium of the shooting incident subsided, the sheriff felt compelled to spend a few hours at the office. He figured Aaron would recognize his dedication under the pressing circumstances. Despite their efforts, the deputies found nothing at the crime scene, no shell casings, no evidence of the shooter's position, and not even a hint of tracks to follow. Frustration gnawed at the sheriff, but he wasn't ready to give up. On a whim, he called a hotel in Monterey, hoping to get Aaron on the line. Moments later, Aaron picked up, his tone brisk as he asked how he could assist the sheriff. The sheriff laid out the situation, the shooting, its aftermath, and the good news that Savannah and Eric Jackson had emerged unscathed. He also mentioned that the fence had been repaired with new posts, the gate replaced, and the perimeter restored. However, Aaron's pickup truck was being held as evidence, and extensive repairs would be necessary once it was released. Aaron's response was swift and sarcastic. "No problem. I'll just take it out of your son-in-law's paycheck. Maybe then he'll think twice about doing favors for my wife." The sheriff couldn't ignore the faint bitterness in Aaron's voice. Everyone who heard about the incident, Aaron, the sheriff, the deputies, and beyond, found it hard to believe the explanation involving the earring. Aaron's daughter, Donna, who also happened to be Eric Jackson's wife, was particularly skeptical. Aaron likely anticipated a grilling from Donna and perhaps a few icy nights ahead. Fortunately, he had some time to prepare. His company's twin-engine plane had just landed at 256 Airport, giving him a window to stop by the office before heading home to ready himself for a dual celebration, his birthday and an April Fool's Day event at the Civic Center. Before leaving work, he loaded a USB drive with photos and videos to showcase during the evening's festivities. Public gatherings weren't Aaron's favorite, but Savannah had insisted on the party to celebrate his achievements. She wanted to highlight his rise to become the wealthiest man in the area, thanks to his grit, sharp instincts, and knack for calculated risks. While Aaron admitted it made for a good story, he felt it had already been told enough in newspapers, on television, and even in Texas Monthly. Still, he played along. In a custom tuxedo and handmade boots, Aaron cut a striking figure, but Savannah, as always, commanded the spotlight. Draped in a scarlet gown with daring slits that accentuated her long, elegant legs, she radiated sophistication. Standing 5'1". Tall, Savannah resembled a modern supermodel, a role she'd once held during her teenage years. Her golden hair and poised demeanor captivated everyone in the room. She had left the modeling world behind after meeting Aaron, a rugged and charismatic 26-year-old millionaire. At 23, with her modeling career winding down, Savannah found Aaron's wealth and charm irresistible. Within 6 months, they were married. Their first years together were fulfilling, but Savannah's restlessness eventually crept back. In the last 6 months alone, she had made 3 trips to Los Angeles under the pretense of visiting her parents, but her real motives included rekindling old connections and chasing the thrill of city life. During these visits, she'd also begun an affair with Eric Jackson, though her interest in him had started to wane. As the party began, Savannah moved effortlessly among the guests, charming everyone and soaking in their admiration. Barbecue was served, and after some mingling, the night's program commenced. The MC led the crowd in a spirited rendition of Happy Birthday for Aaron. In his brief speech, Aaron expressed gratitude to everyone who had made the evening possible, especially Savannah, who rose gracefully to acknowledge the applause. Then, the focus returned to Aaron as he unveiled a presentation celebrating his team's dedication and the success of his ventures. Massive screens displayed photos and videos of his employees and contractors, accompanied by a patriotic soundtrack. Aaron shared touching anecdotes, crediting the individuals who had contributed to his empire. The presentation transitioned to a segment highlighting a contractor friend named Eddie, who specialized in advanced security systems. Aaron recounted how Eddie had recently installed a state-of-the-art system at his ranch after Aaron noticed suspicious activity during a workshop. The system had already proven useful, sending alerts directly to Aaron's phone. He shared a humorous story about the system's first intruder, which turned out to be a wild hog, eliciting laughter from the crowd. But then Aaron's tone shifted. Earlier that day, while conducting business in Monterey, he'd received another alert. Expecting another false alarm, he had casually informed the sheriff's office, only to learn that this time the cameras had captured human intruders. Donna had told him the sheriff was already on the case. With a sly smile, Aaron invited the audience to watch the surveillance footage. Seated near the stage, Eric Jackson tried to slip out unnoticed, but two burly men intercepted him and escorted him back to his seat, where Donna waited with a deceptively calm expression. Meanwhile, Savannah, seated prominently in the front, turned as red as her gown as the video played. The footage showed two figures, Eric and Savannah, arriving in a company truck, embracing, and entering what they had dubbed their love nest. The video continued, leaving no doubt about their actions. The audience sat in stunned silence, the tension in the room palpable. When the video ended, Aaron stood, his face unreadable, and thanked everyone for attending the party. As he exited, the room buzzed with whispers, the fallout of Savannah and Eric's betrayal now impossible to ignore. Aaron tapped the fast-forward button, causing the video to play at a hilarious, accelerated pace. The scene on the screen zipped through every action in an almost cartoonish flurry of motion. When the footage slowed to normal speed, Eric Jackson's sneering voice cut through, filled with derision aimed squarely at Aaron. Simultaneously, Savannah was in the midst of a heated exchange, hurling venomous insults at Donna. Neither Savannah nor Donna showed any inclination to defend their respective partners, the tension between them crackling like static. Aaron paused the recording precisely when Eric Jackson stated, "We need to get back. We don't want to raise any eyebrows." Savannah's response was quick, dripping with mockery. "The April Fool thing will never catch on. But yeah, let's head back. I need time to prepare for his party tonight. Just picture it, babe. Me sitting beside him with your marks all over me." Eric Jackson chuckled smugly and added, "Don't forget to tear him down a notch or two before you cozy up to him. Big boss man's nothing but my little lapdog." At that point, the camera caught Savannah collapsing onto the table, sobbing uncontrollably. Whether her tears were genuine or an elaborate performance mattered little to Aaron. He wasn't interested in deciphering her sincerity. Suddenly, the tension in the room exploded as Eric's wife stormed up from behind and delivered a resounding slap across his face. The crack of the impact echoed, silencing any lingering murmurs. As Eric scrambled to get up, two men swiftly restrained him, pinning him in place for her next move. She followed up with a solid punch directly to his nose, leaving no room for ambiguity about her fury. Aaron stepped forward, his voice slicing through the thick silence like a razor. "So, let's get this straight. My employee borrows my truck to take my wife to my ranch house so they can mess around on my bed, all on my time. What do you all think I should do about that?" He let his gaze sweep across the room, his words hanging ominously in the air. After a moment, he answered his own question. "Yeah, I thought so too." Turning sharply toward Eric Jackson, Aaron delivered his verdict. "You're fired. And as for you," he said, shifting his glare to Savannah, "you're fired too." He gestured to an envelope resting on the table, his tone unrelenting. "The paperwork is right here. And just so you know, these 400 witnesses can confirm you've officially been served. Oh, and about that prenup your lawyer insisted on? Guess what? I'm enforcing every single word of it." Aaron's voice grew colder, each word laced with finality. "Your things are already packed in a truck. Take your flashy car, your cheap self, and get out of my town. Leave the state while you're at it, and don't even think about coming back." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, before delivering the coup de grace. "Oh, and one more thing. April Fools." My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.